obviously thrilled that you can be here. We know that it's cold. There are a lot of other things to do in New York. I'll just briefly, I'm the director of White Columns. I'll just briefly introduce the idea of the White Columns Annual, which started in 2006. So this is actually the 20th anniversary of the exhibition. This is the 16th edition of the exhibition. We missed 2 during the pandemic, and we missed 2 when the gallery was relocating and we couldn't guarantee that we would have a home. But the exhibition started in 2006, and the invitation is to a guest curator, or sometimes curators, to make an exhibition based on the art that they saw in New York in the previous year. And one of the things that interests me, and it continues to interest me, is there's so much art to see in New York. No one individual can have a sort of overview or a take on it. And I was very interested in how, as individuals, we negotiate the New York art worlds, multiple. And when we do that, what do we take with us? What do we remember? How do we reconstruct that experience for ourselves? And then what if you gave someone an opportunity to make an exhibition based on that experience? So all of the works you see here, Augusto saw somewhere else in New York last year. And that's been the case for each of these exhibitions. And what I was interested in is 2 things. One is who we invite to organize the exhibition. And then the second thing is about the role subjectivity plays in our relationship with art. Because our history sort of aspires to be objective, and I think a lot of the larger biennials and triennials, certainly in this century, have sort of aspired towards an objectivity where they seek to be representative, which of course is impossible. But with this exhibition, we're actively encouraging someone to be hyper-subjective. It's really about the things that they're interested in, the things that they like, maybe even the things that they love. And this sort of idea of subjectivity, I think, has been largely suppressed and marginalized in art this century. So we're very interested to return this role of subjectivity back to the idea of an exhibition. It was very common, say, with Whitney biennials in the 1880s and 90s, that they were much more rooted in an individual's vision, taste, ideas, and so forth. So that's what the basic idea was. Each January, we appoint the curator for the following exhibition. So a couple of weeks ago, we appointed the curators for the next one, and it's 2 people who publish a really interesting journal. And a year ago, we invited Augusto to do the same. So on Augusto's travels in the art world, and I really encourage you to follow him on Instagram. I think Augusto sees more art than any human being I'm aware of. We were very interested in what kind of exhibition Augusto would make of that experience, and he's obviously going to speak to that. It's a very rare opportunity for White Columns in our programs, because our programs, we typically only show the work of emerging, under-recognized artists. Within our regular programs, we're really most interested in art before any kind of consensus has attached itself to it. And this is a very rare opportunity once a year in our programs where we can show all kinds of artists. Some very, very famous, some extremely established, others less so. And for us, it's just become an interesting part of the gallery's DNA. And if you look at the kind of history of these 16 exhibitions, which are all quite well documented on the website, I think you get a sort of interesting map of some of the kind of tendencies that have been unfolding in the art world. Of course, the art world is quite trend-driven, and I think we see that in the galleries as we go around each year. We see the things changing, we see what's being privileged. But in this case, it's very much about an individual's take, and this year the individual is Augusto. So I'll hand over to Augusto, and again, thank you for coming.
Thanks, everyone. Happy Valentine's Day. Thanks for joining us and for coming in today. Thankfully, it's nice outside. So, my name is Augusto.
Can I just interrupt 1 second? Yeah. I also just want to say, Augusto's White Columns alumni. He had an exhibition here as an artist in 2000. Curated an exhibition here in 2002, and currently works as an art advisor.
So in my current role, I work for an art advisory firm as an advisor and curator. And so essentially my job there is to look at as much art as possible. So in New York, I see, like on the way here, I probably stopped by like 10 galleries. And a lot of the time I see shows like very quickly, like zipping through. And then also within this show, there are also artists I saw or artworks that I saw at art fairs, which is part of the industry that I am in. in that I have to see everything at these fairs. So there are some artists here who have not had solo shows in New York yet, but they were seen in New York at art fairs. So I think unique for this show perhaps is that there are works in the show by artists who were in who had big museum shows, Jack Whitten, for example. And then again, artists who had your normal commercial gallery exhibitions that were up for several weeks. And then there's examples here that were up for literally 3 hours at a fair and then put away because it was sold. So I would say that I love all of the artists in here. I trained as a painter. I went to Cooper Union, and I did curatorial studies in grad school. So I lean towards formal work, very hand-drawn work, experimentation, process, pushing the boundary of of an artist's chosen medium. So I also pay attention to artists whose careers. So there's peaks and valleys in artists' careers. There are artists who never do not get recognized in their lifetime. There are artists who really need sort of like help getting their movement, for them to be seen. And then so there are artists in here who the art world in the last half dozen years has been more open to rediscovery and finding artists' works who did not get their due while they were alive, and some of them obviously sadly passed too young. So some examples of those are like Pasita Abad, who is the artist that you see in the front, a Filipino artist who worked all over the world. She is known for making trapuntos, which are these hybrid paintings that are quilted. They have padding inside them. They have stitching and decoration on them. This is an abstract work, but she also makes, very political and socially engaged images. She had a big museum show at PS1 last year, and I would encourage you to look for her work. She will have a show at Tina Kim Gallery, I believe, this May. And then next to diagonal from her is a South African artist named Ikshan Adams, who works, in this space between craft, installation, performance. These are works like this. They usually have the ideas behind them usually originate from social activities. Like the dust cloud is basically inspired by dancing on very dry earth, and then that's the cloud that gets formed, from the movement, from very, very fast movement. So that's the inspiration for those works. He had a show at KC Kaplan last year. He will have a show at the Bow opening in March. This was a very happy coincidence in terms of pairing, because I had meant for that to go somewhere else, but then that was the only place it could go. Let's see. So in terms of the artists, I would say there's probably like a third historical artist in here, a third living in established, and then a third more emerging. Let's go to the room over here. Questions while I'm talking about any of these artists. Have a room that is installed more, the relationships are more formal. This artist is Kenichiro Fukumoto, who is a very young painter who lives in Tokyo. I actually met him when I visited Tokyo, but then he has a very young Japanese gallery who participated in Nada in New York last year. They had a tiny booth, like literally the size of your closet. And they brought a solo booth of this artist, and then I saw it again in Nada, Miami, and I think it's, somebody who still hasn't had a formal exhibition here that I think is interesting, especially in terms of the process. There's other historical artists in the other room, Atsuko Tanaka, part of the Butai movement, and you can see the relationship in terms of playing with paint and pushing it. In terms of historical authors, this is Joe Brainerd, who had 2 shows last year, one at Craig Star and another one at American Art Catalogs. I think people consider him like an artist. Does hybrid work, a lot of collage, and this is a self-portrait. Donna Nelson, who has a show right now in Canada, but she also had a 2-person show at her gallery in Chelsea last year. This is a work meant to be seen from the front and the back. I believe today is the last day of Donna's show at Canada. If you have time, it's a nice day out. I'd go back down there and see it. But she's really pushing literally the paint into your space. I think people become afraid when like painting gets in the way. In the show at Canada, it's literally like in the middle of the gallery, and it's a very dynamic way to look at stretch canvases and consider why is it that we're always insistent on just having a painting on the wall. This is Yu Nishimura, who is a Japanese artist. He's up in his 40s now. First saw at a gallery downtown here at Kingsley. Is that true? Like maybe 4 or 5 years ago? But he's now with David Zwerner. David Zwerner did a show, very, very beautiful show, uptown last year. They're very kind of humble imagery. It's day-to-day life. These are portraits. He does also like landscapes and cityscapes. Very quiet. And so is this Mary Stevenson, who is a UK-based artist who has a show right now at Maureen Haley, a 2-person show, but had work at Chapter New York's booth at Frieze New York this last year. Diana Ciplino is this small, very haunting portrait in the corner here. She is a Polish painter, an older painter, but still making fantastic work. Shows with Plan B Gallery in Berlin, and had a show at Kaufman Repetto last year. This is Machtel Ruins next to it, and that is actually just painted cardboard. She's Dutch, had a show at Andrew Krebs and Lucas Podge last year. When I first saw this work at an art fair, I kept thinking, oh, that's great ceramics, and not until I didn't realize, because it feels like it. This one, she says, is inspired by, or Agnes Martin. You can see the lines, obviously. And then this is Kianja Strobert. I might be mispronouncing that. And she had a show at Marinero last year. I wanted to have like seating in the show because I went to some like spaces last year, and as a person who has to like run around to like see shows, I always like, oh, can I sit in this? So it really literally changes your view of the work, and when you do that, things you look at things so slightly different temperature, and like it makes you take your time. I encourage it.
One thing we never discussed during the process, and whilst the show's been up, is that there's very clearly a juxtaposition of figurative work and representational work. I mean, was that something you were thinking about through the year, or is that something you're thinking about when you started to make decisions?
There were 2 things I kind of knew from the beginning I would try and do. One was that I would select work that were larger in scale as anchors for the show, because I wanted to see larger pieces in here to sort of, and then go for work off of that. And then as I went through the year, although figuration has been something that's been in the air for the last 5 years, I feel like last year, I saw more, the shows were more focused on the face and looking at human, face And I thought that would be a good sort of, it's just kind of a good counterbalance of the pure abstraction that I knew was going to be in the show, to sort of just, not oppositional, but complementary, and also can be a stand-in for you, for us, if you were. There are portraits at the dock to show. I think there's half a dozen. And for all the artists I've been in here, I could have made like a show with like 30 more artists. But obviously, yeah, I had to like really hone it down. And then there's some artists that didn't work out for one reason or another. Any questions in this room?
Do you have any idea of how many shows you saw last year? I guess it's too.
No,
You don't
I do look at
tally.
my phone once in a while.
Yeah.
So in my job, I see as many shows as possible, and whether I think the show is good, strong, bad, terrible, fantastic, I have take pictures and record everything. So if I don't do anything with it in real time, I'm never really look at it again, usually, because when I go through an art fair, I will literally share 1,000 pictures that day. And I try not to editorialize because I think, I want to have a very democratic eye, just absorb everything. Because I'm very much of that. That's definitely my persuasion, where the world is big, there's room for everything, and things don't have to be better or oppositional, or if one person likes it, another person hates it. Great.
I think one of the things that we've done when we've been thinking about who to invite to do this is that if you look at the list of 16 people that have done this so far, each of them has a very different and distinct relationship with the art world. I think only one of them was formally identified as a curator. So everybody else has a different role. It's either as an artist or someone's working with an art advisory. Once there was 4 people who ran a gallery together called Cleopatra's. Other times it's been a publisher, and of course the next one will be a publisher too. But we're also really interested in people who are looking in this, since the advent of social media at least, we're looking in quite a public way, and they're sharing what they're seeing through their social media platforms. So 2 years ago, or last year, it was Elizabeth Clay, an artist who is a ceramicist mostly, but she also has this really phenomenal Instagram account where she shows us what she's looking at, and it sort of harks back to her time as a writer for Art in America in the 1990s. So we're very interested in this idea of people who have interesting relationships to the art world, and that they're different from each other.
The one thing I think about is that we as New Yorkers are very, very lucky, seeing art at galleries which are free. You can't get that anywhere else. And if anything else, I hope people take advantage of that. Everything is so expensive in this city, but you can spend a whole day, seeing a lot of art. A lot of it's amazing. A lot of it you're never going to see again after it comes out, because it's going to go to some big collector's house. But it's free, and not in the same way that the opera is $250, the movie is $25. Pasta is $35. So art's one of the few things left in the city. So I really, gallery going is a very, very New York thing. Right. And New York is still, I go everywhere, but New York still remains the best gallery city. It's very easy. There's a lot of pockets. If you choose to and have the time, you can go to the outlier galleries, but then there are many great ones. So, yeah.
I'm sorry, I interrupted.
No, that's okay. You had just said that this morning, Joe
Brainerd, yeah.
is an artist.
It's an artist who, these are what I call, when you go to art school, and then you go and do studio visits, it's the artist that everybody's book is at their studio. It's because they think they found the artist themselves, and they get obsessed with it, and it inspires them for forever. And it's not usually a known name, because you're not gonna. Actually, there is a Joe Brainerd out there, but not right now. But it's not a painter. It's not an artist that you're gonna. He is in textbooks, but it's not an artist that you're gonna see up at MoMA all the time. It's kind of you have to you have to keep his spirit with you alive, going by you, like by the artist looking at it constantly.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Like usually also like a painter's painter.
Sure.
That's another thing, you know. Like you get obsessed with it, and that's always on the top of your art book.
I think also historically there's a really important history of artists who collect work, and often the way that those artists collect, Jeffrey Jones would be a great example, Richard Tuttle would be another, that what they support through collecting is often very prescient, that 5, 10, 25, 30 years later, those artists become really key figures, and most of the initial support for those artists came from other artists.
Yeah. Cool, let's go to another room. This side of the space, I think we got very lucky because things kind of like hung very beautifully next to each other. And there's so many connections from one work to the next. There are like some through lines that happen, you know, artists who are experimenting with like reproduction methods, which includes Miranda Lichtenstein, who's a New York artist. So the works in the show include work that I saw at artist studio visits as well. So Miranda Lichtenstein is maybe one of them. She hasn't had a show in New York in a while. But that's a new work for her. It's next to that's mechanically printed work. I think it's multiple passes. This is one of the best things that I saw last year was the Jack Wick show. I think people would agree that was very much a revelation. But there was a section of that show where I think he got a grant or a residency with then Xerox was like a big company. So this is a work made with Xeroxes, and it's just like mundane things. Like there's a coin there. I think there's a piece of clothing, but he arranged it in a grid. Very mosaic-like. But I think it looks like somebody could have made it today. Like it looks very fresh. Harney Hill, again, a very hybrid process. He makes a lithographic. A drawing on lithostone, and then instead of printing it on paper, he prints it on clear acetate that uses that as a negative to make a photo print, and then works further into it. So you can't tell how it's made. And you take a picture of it and you keep thinking, oh my, it's out of focus. This is Bettina, another artist who is just kind of getting her due. Sadly, she passed away, I think in the 2010s. She was performance and photo-based artist. These are street photographs of New York. This series of works were done mid-70s to the early 80s. There are two vitrines, and I came into white columns. I came here a few times just to see like the space and how it's loaded. And then one time I saw these vitrines and work in them. I was like, oh, we should use your vitrines. So, both this work and the work over there, Marcia Cottrell, they had never been exhibited this way. So, both the dealers were like, oh, that looks interesting. But you look at it more serially, obviously, when you put it in a case like this. This is Karol Palchak, who is a Polish painter on the very rural area of Poland next to Ukraine in the militarized zone. You should look up his work. He makes amazing paintings. Very graphic in the sense that they're very specific. I mean, he also makes still lifes. Usually, they're life that's compromise, or decaying, portraying what's happening in that part of the world. Lee Bonteque, who had amazing work at Ortizar and also at TEFAF New York last year. So this kind of worked out well in the sense that there's this dialogue about forces of nature. Lee Bonteque, Jacob Littlejohn, who is a Scottish painter, landscape inspired. It's obviously kind of like a night scene. Had a show at Karma last year. It's interesting, he makes both really tiny paintings and then really, really big paintings. Let's see, Jesse Reeves, again, you can sit on it. Kind of
Jesse Reeves will have the next show Art and Letters on the Upper West Side. That's sort of her first New York Survey exhibition.
So Arts and Letters is the space for the American Academy of Arts and Letters. If you have not been there or have not been there in a long time, you should put it on your itinerary because they are doing amazing programming. I think some of the best programming in the city right now. You know, it's kind of out of the way, but
I
it's
go
really
further
worth
to
it.
say the best programming.
Yeah, it's really good. They have a great Sam contest show right now. Or maybe it's
Just finished.
Yeah, it was really good.
I mean, I think one of the interesting things about the exhibition is that it allows works to, all exhibitions obviously are temporary, and this exhibition allows works to coexist that will probably never be together ever again, because there's no reason for these works to be
You would,
juxtaposed. And I think that's one of the great things over the series of these 16 exhibitions is through the agency of whoever's selecting this show, you can establish new conversations between artworks that have literally nothing in common, apart from your relationship with them.
correct, and I agree. Yeah, like because some of these there's no way I would have thought I would hang this next to that.
Right.
But I did think I would hang these two together. Just because the line, I mean, this is just a very formal, you know, but this Mira Schendel surprised me.
It's the only time we've had a Willem de Kooning at Mike Tom's in its 56 years history.
So, you know, that Willem de Kooning show last year was amazing. One has to say, those when they do a really good show, they're incredible. The Jasper John show right now, you cannot miss it. And also the Michael Heiser show. But here it's, you know, there's just this real dialogue with the use of line, intuitive use of line. This is Mira Schendel, who is a very, very important Brazilian artist. These are monotypes that she made on rice paper, where she would just kind of like make, like poem-like, but not readable compositions on glass. She would do it on glass, and then she would put rice paper on it. So it's technically a monotype, a monoprint. The Kooning Woman Drawing, and then Salman Tour, who had an incredible show at Louis Augustine last year. There's just this like movement in the line work that I thought worked very well. Julia Ramo, who is in a two-person show right now here, but she was in a few group shows last year, including at BBOW, and again at Cura. So you can see the gestural relationships here. And then one of the most amazing shows last year was Laura Owens at Matthew Morris. I hope you all got to see that. And this is one of a series of boxes that she made, and everything is handmade. After we talk,
By the way, I'm handling it correctly. Apparently, the use of gloves is not the right way to handle things like this. It's a unique sketchbook.
Was this in the show?
This was in the show, yeah. So I think there are editions of 3 and 1 exhibition copy. Yeah. She's just really pushing the limits of like object making, and it's incredible. Anybody have questions? Ready for the Whitney Biennial? The new museum triennial? Greater New York? What
But
else?
certainly when we started this show in 2006, it was very much thinking about the other kind of biennials and triennials that existed, especially in New York, which included the new museum, which had probably just started, the Greater New York exhibition, and obviously the Whitney Biennial, which happens in a month next door. And that also falls back into this sort of idea of privileging subjectivity, because more recently those exhibitions are privileged in an attempt to representative objectivity, whatever that means. And we certainly were always interested in seeing the White Comp Annual as a kind of counterpoint to that. Not necessarily in a kind of sort of adversarial way, but as a kind of different way of thinking about our relationships, individual relationships with art. And I think, you mentioned something quite interesting, because one of the things we're interested in is that the people that we invite to select the annual exhibitions, they're obviously not just seeing works in galleries and museums. As Augusto said, you're seeing work at studio visits, seeing work at people's homes sometimes. And I think the rise of art fairs has been an interesting aspect of the annual too. So last year in Elizabeth Clay's exhibition, I think there were 6 or 7 objects that she'd seen at the Outsider Art Fair. So they were briefly on view for 3 or 4 days at the Metropolitan Pavilion. They either disappeared into the private collections, and then we had to find them to return them back for the exhibition itself. But it's very much about the time we spend with objects and also where we spend time with objects. And I think, most of our encounters with artworks, it's a few seconds. We rarely spend more than a few seconds with an individual artwork. And I certainly thought that for the selectors, it's a kind of rare opportunity to spend time with a work again. That you can create kind of sort of sense of deja vu for the selector. And this would be a good example, I think, of one of the boxes that Laura had in her show. It was very hard to spend time with because it was hard to have any kind of individual relationships with them. But here you could spend time with this if you wished.
Speaking of the shows that Matthew mentioned, the annual, triennial, biennial, those part of their function is that the shows, exhibitions are heavily vetted shows, meaning curators, committees, everything, which adds layers between you and the that work in the studio. So I think that's a great thing about the White Columns Annual, which is, curators and people that Matthew knows well that have a very, very one-to-one immediate relationship with the works they see and can bring it in here, and for everyone to be able to have the opportunity to see that point of view.
Yeah.
So in the final term here, there is work by Marcia Cottrell that's in the case. These are done on Japanese paper. Again, they're mechanical. They're done, it's laser toner on paper, multiple passes through the printer, but never seeing it on the screen. I think they're quite beautiful, very delicate. And then we have Atsuko Tanaka, Joe Overstreet, almost exactly the same age actually, working in Japan, working in the Lower East Side. And I think they died 1 year apart. But you can just see the formal relationship. I did not expect to put these two together, but I think it's interesting dialogue in terms of a certain, obviously coming from very, very different viewpoints, of pushing the use of commercial paint. Atsuko Tanaka obviously coming from a more conceptual point of view of the Gutai. And then over here, we have Kent O'Connor, who is a contemporary California painter who makes, is one of the, Carol Potter also, observed paintings. This is a self-portrait. He makes still lifes, landscapes of his family and friends and things he knows and studies. And then Sylvia Slay, a painter from the 70s and 80s, another artist who did not get her full recognition while she was alive, and for X reasons is only getting rediscovered now in the last 2 or 3 years. So yeah, those are the final 2 artists. Oh, and then Brandon Morris, who is, I think, the youngest artist in the show. He's terrific. He shows with a gallery named Europa. And he does different types of sculptures, but this is basically, he makes a full dress, and then there's it's fiberglass on that. This actually was not seen in New York, it was shown in Paris. But this works that were shown here in New York were unavailable for some reason, but they never saw it. But it was very similar series. So I wanted, we placed this here because I wanted this to be like a smooth walking room, it's like a stand-in for the viewer and how to navigate the space. So yeah, thank you for coming.
Yeah.
Happy to answer questions individually.